Thank you for listening to Dharma Talk from One Mind Dharma. My name is Matthew Sokolov, and I'm sitting down here with Elizabeth Sokolov. And to find out more about us, you can visit www.oneminddharma.com. One Mind Dharma is run largely off the support of our community, and we need your help to continue with our offerings. As our following has grown with our website, meditation library, and mobile app, the costs have increased. Please take a moment to visit oneminddharma.com/support to find out how you can support us. We greatly appreciate the support that our community has shown us thus far and hope to reach our goal. This podcast episode is brought to you by Mindful Marketing, online marketing for compassionate businesses. From web design to search engine optimization, Mindful Marketing helps you make an impact in the world. Visit them at www.mindfulmarketing.us. And with that, well, actually, that's not it. You can also download our new mobile app at oneminddharma.com/app. And if you have any questions for us, you can email us at info@oneminddharma.com. If it's just a question about meditation or something we mention or anything, feel free to shoot us an email. We both offer donation-based meditation coaching if you want to dive a little more deeply into your practice and work with the teacher. Did I miss any potatoes?
I think you got it all.
Before we get to the tofu. There's a podcast I listen to where they have the meat and the potatoes, and the potatoes at the beginning are all the kind of what we just did, the kind of promotional stuff, and then they get into the meat. But we thought since this is a Buddhist podcast, we'd get into the tofu.
It's very clever.
So anyways, tofu, here we come. Elizabeth has a topic for us this week.
Yeah, so it's something that I thought a lot about when I was new to meditation. And I was just thinking, because we have so many people who are new in our group.
Did someone just ask us this?
I haven't gotten this question in a couple months.
Oh, someone did at a treatment center, kind of.
Oh, okay. So the question that we're going to answer, the topic we're going to talk about is, how do I know what meditation to do? How do I know what to sit with? And I'll explain that a little bit more. So sometimes people wonder, how do I know when I should do compassion meditation versus when I should do concentration meditation? How do I know when I should do forgiveness versus compassion? That might be a little bit more difficult to disentangle. And then some people say, well, I've heard that you should only do concentration meditation for your first year of meditating. Is that what I should do? And I think that it's a really fruitful question to be asking if you're, getting into your own meditation practice. And I certainly have my opinions, but I'll let you take it away.
You have your own opinions?
I'll let you throw your opinion out there first, or opinions.
Yeah, so, I think it's kind of a tough question just because there's not one of those kind of blanket answers that's, always right or always correct, or maybe it's not as clear cut of an answer as we want when we often ask questions. And it tends to be like that, I feel like, a lot with the Dharma and meditation, where you ask a question and it's not like yes or no, black and white. But anyways, I do think that there is some value in sitting with one practice, right?
I do too, yeah.
I think that, and just again, coming back to that, I'm not going to lean one way or another on this too hard, but I do think that it can be really beneficial to dive deeply enough into one practice that we can begin to really investigate it. What happens is if we don't really try a practice out wholeheartedly and don't give it our full effort. For example, if we do concentration a little bit and then metta the next day and then an open awareness, we don't really cultivate enough concentration to fully reap the benefits or understand how it's working. And the same could be said for any practice. On the other hand, if we're only practicing concentration and we're not making a diligent effort to bring metta to our practice, our concentration practice is going to be dry and maybe even a little harsh.
I think that's a really good point. And one of the things that I think about when I think about this question is, one, this is a really good reason why it's helpful to have a meditation teacher or even a meditation group that you go to. It wasn't until I started working with a meditation teacher that I really found out the right answer to this question for me. And I will say that. I think the answer is always relative. But I think you're pointing to something really important, that the reason that we have all these different meditation practices is because we need all of them, right? I don't think you can just pick and choose the one that appeals to you and say, all right, I'm only going to practice concentration for exactly the reason you just said. It's going to end up being a little bit harsh if you're not incorporating some aspect of metta. So I will say I have one sort of guideline that I really like to follow, and it's advice that I heard early on when I started meditating, and that's at least don't change what you're doing while you're doing it. So decide in advance what kind of meditation you're going to do. And then once you're meditating, don't change what you're doing. If your mind is going, you know what, I really like to ditch this forgiveness practice and move to a concentration practice, I tend to err on the side of don't do that. Stick with what you set out to do. And there are some exceptions, obviously. You don't want to, if you're having like a really overwhelming experience, you don't want to just ignore how you're feeling in lieu of, trying to do what you're doing. But for the most part, really try to stay within the meditation practice that you've set out to do for that period of sitting. The other thing that my meditation teacher said that was really helpful is she said, whatever practice you do, end with 5 minutes of metta. So that way, whatever you're doing.
That's Joanna.
Joanna Harper recommended you might do 15 minutes of a concentration practice, or 15 minutes of, especially if it's not a heart practice, 15 minutes of Vedana, where you're noticing the feeling tone. And then for the last 5 minutes, do some metta to make sure that you're bringing gentleness into your practice. And this is something that can be helpful not just with metta, but some people choose to start every practice with a body scan. That's another thing that I did. So one way to go about answering this question is you can sit with you can have a main thing that you're doing and then a little bit of something else. But just to have that plan ahead of time of this is what I do.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can one sitting period doesn't have to be one practice necessarily.
Exactly.
It's funny. We've written a couple posts about because so many people ask us about tips for meditation, how to begin meditating or meditating for beginners. And we have one at oneminddharma.com/how-to and another one at oneminddharma.com/tips. And in one of them, it says one of the tips is to start simply, just try one practice for a week. And in the other post, it says to try different practices. And it also says in that same post to just try one practice. And I pointed it out in the post, it sounds a little hypocritical, but it is, you got to find that balance for yourself. That was Thanissaro Bhikkhu starts his meditations with a few minutes of metta. Mm-hmm. And I've also heard it if you're doing a body scan, you can end with a few minutes of metta specifically toward the body.
Yeah.
So you find a way to kind of bring it in. For me, I don't find necessarily that I've heard it, I think I heard it a lot at Against the Stream, not necessarily from the teachers, but from the community maybe when we were sitting there regularly, that people would do insight practices in the morning and heart practices at night kind of thing. And I don't really think that that's the best way to go for me. And that doesn't mean it may not be for someone else. For me, it's, I kind of decide when I go to sit what I'm going to sit with and I stick with that. And like you said, no matter what, to basically, not no matter what, sometimes It calls to switch to compassion, but to really try to stick with that and try to be with it and try to, see the practice all the way through. I do start every one of my meditations with a body scan. Even if we're just doing 5 minutes, I will spend the first minute just really tuning into the body and where the body's at, because I find it grounding. It's not so much a, this practice versus that practice thing as much as, and could perhaps be the best answer, because I find it useful.
Yeah.
So, what do you find useful? And what I find useful may not be what you find useful, and it may not be what the listener finds useful or whatever, but you got to figure out what's useful to you. For me, I can say when I started that I pretty much just did pure concentration on the breath practice and mixed in some metta. I didn't really jump into like the Vedana and open awareness and mindfulness because it was too much for me in that moment. Or I don't think I was like concentrated enough, or maybe I also didn't understand it enough, but that worked for me. I don't think that, one person's path is everyone's.
I agree. Interesting you just said that, because I was thinking, I once heard Noah Levine at a meditation group answer this question. And his answer to the question was, when you're new to meditation, it's really helpful to do like 1 week with one practice, 1 week with another practice. And like you were saying in the beginning, really familiarize yourself and get grounded in those practices. And then he said, but truthfully, for me in my practice right now, I have the discernment to know what type of meditation I need. And that's how I feel now too. I'm able to, right before I go to sit, know what I need for the most part, hopefully, and then sit with that. But it was important for me at the beginning to spend a little bit of time with these practices that I was just getting introduced to, so that I had some familiarity with them. You can't know what type of meditation you need if you don't know what types of meditation there are.
Well, I've always been a big, like, kind of this insight practice versus heart practice piece. And I've always been a fan of the insight practices and really understanding experience as a way to, respond with more kindness. That maybe, my experience was I don't need dedicated metta practice. When I'm seeing clearly and mindful and in the moment, the kindness comes naturally. There's, kindness within us. Then I don't know how we ended up sitting the metta retreat, which I didn't super want to. I wanted to sit the insight retreat right after with Joseph Goldstein. But we sat the metta retreat, and that was 3 years ago, that first one?
3 years ago.
And it completely changed my experience of the heart practices. And then since then we've sat it again, of course. And even more interesting is since then, my experience of the heart practices has completely changed as far as bringing it to my mindfulness practices. So just to point towards this, we can have a preference, or we can have something that's useful to us. And it's not just year by year. Sometimes it's week by week. Sometimes I really need just like a week of just hardcore self-compassion. Sometimes I really need a week of awareness because I find myself just being completely unaware, or not tuning into you, or not concentrated. And I like to think there's like a piece of like trusting my instinct and like my inner wisdom when I go to sit, knowing what I need to sit with. Maybe it's total delusion and I'm picking the thing that's like going to be the easiest for me in that moment. But it feels like I'm like trusting some inner wisdom. Like I don't have to think about it. Like something knows inside of me what I need.
And I don't want to repeat myself, but again, grappling with that is another great reason to either be sitting with a group or with a teacher, because you can talk about that. Maybe you are wanting to sit with this thing and it is aversive and you're not seeing that. And when you bounce that idea off another person, even if it's just another peer who meditates, you can get some more perspective into what you think you need for yourself versus maybe what other people are seeing more clearly from the outside.
Yeah, and I don't want to totally change the subject, but that's a reason, and we've talked about it on here before, and I mentioned it in speaking of those like tips for beginners and how-tos. I think I try to mention it in every single post about that. That's the benefit of sitting with a group.
Absolutely.
Is, even if you say something to someone and they give you just horrible advice that is totally useless, at least a lot of times we process things differently when we say it out loud. I've had that on this podcast. I've had that when I'm speaking at an AA meeting where I say something. Actually, we were just talking to one of our teachers, Kevin Griffin, the Friday night or something. And what did he say? And he was like, wow, that was really insightful or something.
I can't remember, but I remember him saying
He said something and he goes, I really shocked myself there. Like something like Dharma as insight, or what was it? Something like really simple.
It was something so simple. I truly can't
And he
remember.
was like, I've never thought about it like that. And I don't know where that came from, but that was really insightful. And we were both like, yeah, it totally was. So sometimes talking about things can help us realize what we need. If you don't have a Sangha to sit with, if there's not local meditation groups, there's tons of places that do meditations online. I know there's like In the Rooms has a recovery meditation group. I know that doesn't Tricycle do some too?
Tricycle does a bunch of online courses at least.
But there's like forums and place for people to discuss.
Yeah.
You can always search the One Mind Dharma meditation group on Facebook. Great place for questions and stuff. And then I answer questions on Thursdays at 5 and 5:30 Pacific time on Instagram and Facebook if you have questions you want to bring. But it can be good just to find a peer to meditate with to ask those questions.
Absolutely. Just another person, to bounce this question around with, at least, what should I be sitting with, can be helpful.
I think the reason people because it's funny that Noah says that, and then in the Refuge Recovery book, doesn't it say to only sit with
it does. It says sit with
concentration and forgiveness.
Yeah, it says you start with concentration and forgiveness.
But I do think there's a reason for that. And I think it's because, most of us, when we come to sitting practice, and not just when we come to sitting practice, but me still, it's not easy to just sit down and have, in meditation and stay awake.
Absolutely.
And not be anxious. So those concentration practices can be helpful.
And a lot of people turn to the 4 foundations of mindfulness and sort of move through them in that order also.
Yeah, that's a good way to go.
Yeah. So there's...
Be a good podcast episode
next
week, because we don't really ever talk about that.
Let's do that.
And when people do talk about it, they leave out the 4th one always.
That's true.
Well, awesome. Looks like we found a topic for next week.
See, that's what happens when you talk out loud with a peer.
Beautiful example, not planned. So what I'm trying to think of the announcements we usually make at the end. Visit us at oneminddharma.com. We would love your support as, we're struggling right now just as far as keeping One Mind Dharma afloat. Everything has gotten quite expensive as we've grown beyond what we expected. You can check out that page, oneminddharma.com/support, to see the numbers of people that listen to our podcasts and subscribe to our emails and are really, engaging with us. We appreciate any support. There's a few options on there, like to donate, to become a monthly member, just to share that page with friends to try to help us, become a sponsor. We have some sponsorship opportunities, and we appreciate it.
We do. Thank you.
Thank you.